The invitation arrived on a crisp autumn morning, slipping through the mail slot with an almost sinister precision. Jane Whitmore, once the perennial class loser, stared at the glossy envelope in disbelief. 10 years had passed since she had walked the halls of Crestwood High, a place that had defined her not by her potential, but by her awkwardness, her silence, the way people laughed at her stumbling words and uneven hair. She had been invisible, yet painfully visible at the same time, a paradox of high school cruelty that she had carried in her chest for a decade. And now, the irony of the invitation struck her like a thunderclap. The reunion committee wanted her there, not because they had changed, not because they cared about reconnecting, but because they wanted to mock her. She could practically hear their smirks, smell the faint scent of their superiority. Jane's hand trembled as she turned the envelope over. The words inside were elegant, yet venomous in their politeness. "We would be delighted to have you join us for Crestwood High's 10-year reunion. Your presence will make the evening unforgettable." She laughed, a short, bitter laugh that carried the weight of years spent being underestimated. Unforgettable indeed. But for whom? For them, she thought. For all those who had sneered, whispered, and shoved her to the back of the cafeteria line. Her life since graduation had been anything but ordinary. In the years that followed high school, Jane had built a business empire from scratch. What had once been a timid, clumsy girl with zero confidence had transformed into a woman whose presence commanded attention. She had become an innovator in tech, a disruptor in industries that had once seemed impenetrable, her wealth and success growing quietly, efficiently, almost invisibly. Few in her town, let alone those from Crestwood High, could have predicted her ascent. But she had never sought revenge before. She had focused on her growth, her skills, her power. And now, staring at the invitation, she realized the time for subtlety had passed. The night of the reunion arrived with a cold wind slicing through the streets of Crestwood. Jane's limousine waited at the edge of the city, its black lacquer gleaming under the streetlights. She had left her usual methods behind. No subtle entrances, no quiet arrival. Tonight would be her statement. She glanced at the helicopter pilot waiting beside the vehicle, his uniform crisp and professional. "Everything ready?" she asked, her voice calm but edged with steel. The pilot nodded. Within minutes, Jane ascended above the city. The town she had once feared now stretched below her, a tiny diorama of pettiness and forgotten dreams. Her arrival was nothing short of cinematic. The crowd in the parking lot, mostly the same smug faces that had tormented her in high school, had begun to gather for pre-reunion. Cocktails when the sound of rotor blades cut through the evening air. Heads snapped upwards. Glasses dropped. Conversations faltered mid-sentence. A sleek helicopter descended, its landing lights slicing through the darkness. And as the doors opened, Jane emerged, not in the shy dress they would have expected, not timid or apologetic. She was radiant in a tailored black gown, her hair perfectly coiffed, her expression calm but fierce. She carried herself with an aura that demanded attention, respect, fear. The whispering started almost immediately. "Is that Jane Whitmore?" someone stammered. She's here," another voice added, almost a hiss. "In a helicopter! Who does she think she is?" Jane smiled faintly, stepping down from the aircraft, her heels clicking like the tolling of justice. Cameras flashed as if the paparazzi had arrived, though the only cameras were the smartphones of former classmates now, scrambling to capture a moment they hadn't expected to witness. The girl who had once tripped over her own shoelaces and stuttered through presentations now owned the room without saying a word. Power radiated from her like heat from a forge, and the faces that had once mocked her now twisted with discomfort, envy, and a flicker of fear. Inside the grand hall, the reunion continued, but Jane's entrance had shattered its fragile, superficial balance. Conversations died, whispers circulated like wildfire. Her former tormentors tried to mask their panic with forced smiles, but Jane could see through it all. Every sneer, every smirk, every cruel word replayed in her mind like a film reel. Only now she was the director. She moved through the crowd with grace, acknowledging the few who had treated her with genuine kindness during high school, offering brief, polite nods, while leaving the rest to stew in their realization that the loser they had mocked had become something untouchable. The night progressed, and Jane found herself surrounded by curious eyes, hushed murmurs, and the inevitable approach of those who once deemed themselves superior. Mark and Tiffany, the duo who had orchestrated the most elaborate prank against her senior year, one that had earned her a night alone in the nurse's office after being doused with a bucket of slime, approached cautiously, their smiles tight and false. "Jane, we didn't expect to see you like this," Mark stammered, the bravado that had carried him through high school noticeably absent. Tiffany's eyes darted nervously, calculating, perhaps even rehearsing an apology that would never come. Jane stopped, regarding them with a calm, almost clinical gaze. "You didn't," she replied, her voice soft yet weighted, carrying the authority of someone who had clawed their way out of obscurity and climbed to heights they could only dream of. "But I did." A small, almost imperceptible smirk curved her lips, and the room seemed to shift in recognition. Suddenly, she was no longer a target of ridicule. She was a force, an unspoken challenge, and the tension was almost tangible. Those who had once laughed at her now found themselves shrinking under the weight of her presence. As the evening wore on, Jane's phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. Curious, she glanced at it. "We need to talk now," it was unsigned. A thrill of suspense ran down her spine, a reminder that even in her success, some mysteries of her past were never fully laid to rest. She left the main hall under the guise of needing fresh air, stepping onto the balcony, where the city lights glittered like a constellation she now fully controlled. Moments later, a sleek black car pulled up, and a man she vaguely recognized from high school, someone who had quietly admired her from afar, a shadow among the popular crowd, approached cautiously. "Jane, it's been a long time," he said, his tone a mixture of awe and apprehension. "I have information about what really happened that night." The air thickened with suspense. She listened, her heartbeat steady, her curiosity piqued. Secrets she had long buried were resurfacing, and with them a chance not just for closure, but for revelation and power. Inside the hall, the former bullies attempted to salvage their dignity. They tried to mingle, to dominate conversations, to recreate their former hierarchy. But Jane was not there to participate in their shallow games. Every glance from her was a mirror, reflecting their insecurities. Every smile a reminder of their past cruelty. Then came the moment they feared most. A projection screen lit up, displaying images from the yearbook, snapshots of their high school years. But the images had been carefully curated, each one juxtaposed with captions, highlighting moments of pettiness, hypocrisy, and moral failure among the so-called elite. The crowd gasped, laughter mixing with awkward coughs, and Jane's calm, composed voice resonated through the speakers. "It's remarkable what time reveals," she said, and every eye turned toward her, wide with shock and disbelief. The atmosphere transformed from one of superficial festivity to electric tension. The scales of judgment had shifted, and the balance of power was now hers. As the final moments of the night approached, Jane ascended once more, this time to a stage prepared for speeches. Every seat was tense, every heart racing. She spoke with measured precision, recounting stories that were funny, poignant, and laced with the kind of subtle sting that only those who had wronged her could feel. And then she ended with a line that would echo in the minds of every attendee long after the lights dimmed. "Sometimes the loser is just the one who was preparing for the life you never imagined." The crowd erupted in a mixture of applause, stunned silence, and whispered confessions. Jane smiled, her mission complete. Without a word of hatred, without vengeance that could be called petty, she had rewritten the narrative. She had arrived as the loser they expected to ridicule, and left as the woman who held the power they never saw coming. Outside, her helicopter waited, engines humming, ready to whisk her away. She stepped aboard, leaving behind whispers, shock, and the lingering truth they had underestimated her. And that, she knew, would haunt them forever.